Primal Chaos. I'm not sure I'm 100% prepared for this one, guys. This is Primal Chaos, and today we're checking out Linkin Park Lost. Now, I've deliberately avoided everything to do with this. There's some really good reactors out there that have done this, and I would have loved to have watched their reactions, but I've deliberately held off to keep this one for myself, to be honest. But, oh man, Linkin Park were a big part of my life for many, many, many years. I love their production. I love the way that they sort of reinvigorated and you know, they just sort of like amalgamated your sort of new metal kind of sound with sort of like an urban cultural sort of thing with the hip hop elements and things like that. But they did it in a way that didn't seem forced. It seemed like the kind of music that should have always existed, but it just hadn't up until that point. And there's very few times that I can think of where one particular band defines a new sound, right? I mean, obviously the big one would be Nirvana. They came up with essentially the grunge sound. Every 15-year-old kid who heard like Smells Like Teen Spirit went, this is what I've been looking for, right? Linkin Park, there's really no end to their influence on so many more modern bands. A lot of metalcore bands and stuff take a lot of influence from you know, Linkin Park. Probably a lot of those artists were sort of listening to them when they sort of decided to join bands and things like that, or create bands. So it's a whole thing. And you know, obviously the passing of Chester hit everybody in a really tough way. I remember watching the Chester benefit concert or whatever. Excuse me. And all it illustrated to me was I watched singer after singer come up and attempt to do what he did. And for want of a better way of saying it, failing miserably, right? I don't think there's many singers out there who can do what he did. And all it was to me was one after the other was just testament of how incredible a vocalist Chester was, and how he took it very, very seriously. And he just had a gift. It's as simple as that. And there's a lot of metal singers out there. There's a lot of people out there who can sing, but not the same way, you know? Kind of a Chris Cornell. I know there's some correlation between those two, but Chris Cornell was the same. No one can touch him. He's out there on his own, right? And so losing Chester was a big deal. And, you know, I mean, I'm sure it was rough for Mike and the boys as well. It would have been really tough. Not only losing like a brother, but also just in the circumstances and things like that. And, you know, I'm learning more recently that sometimes Chester wasn't the easiest guy to work with. You know, Mike's being a little bit more open with that in interviews and stuff now. He was troubled and stuff. And so maybe with that being said, that what the situation was, or the way that it unfolded maybe wasn't as foreign a concept as what a lot of us were led to believe. It was like, this came out of nowhere. Well, maybe it didn't. Yeah, but anyway, so this, the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, I think this was a track originally slated for Meteora, which is a great album. It's just one of those beginning to end, just rock solid rock albums. And, you know, it never made the cut, or for whatever reason it wasn't on there. And so they've got an opportunity now to re-release it. I think that a lot of care would have been taken with choosing to do this. I don't think it's something they did willy-nilly. So I'm curious because I love the sound of Linkin Park during this era, and the vibe they had was just so innovative. You know, their aesthetic, the way that they set up their stage production, everything was just super, like, unique and interesting. And you always felt like you were getting something that was like, there was a depth to the cultural aspect of it as well, you know, like with the graffiti art and anime and all that sort of stuff. It was just something that worked, you know? And so let's get into it. Before I do, Enchroma Glasses, if you're colorblind, check out the link. If not, just ignore it. But they're really good. If you or someone who knows colorblind, check them out. You guys know I've got a merch site. You can find that yourselves. Here we go. Lost. Linkin Park, am I emotionally ready for this? I don't think I am. Oh, you can already hear Meteora. Wow. I mean, that's just quintessential Linkin Park, right? Interesting. This is all AI, all this animation.
I pretend it isn't there. I'm trapped in yesterday, where the pain is all I know, and I'll never break away. 'Cause when I'm alone, I'm lost in these memories, living behind my own illusion. Lost all my dignity, living inside my own confusion. But I'm tired.
Wow, okay, this is interesting. It's interesting. I got a lot to talk about, but what I find interesting is that this song, I mean, to my ears, I can see why that maybe this didn't make Meteora, because it's kind of, I mean, it's quintessentially a Meteora sound, but I can see how this might have just gotten lost amongst everything on that album, the heavy hitters and stuff like that. Having said that, I'm kind of glad, because it stands alone on its own as a perfect example of Linkin Park of that era without being swamped by the rest of what else was going on. So it's nice that they've sort of like, you know, surgically removed it from that era and given us another bite at the cherry, because it's a beautiful song, right? I can see, I mean, the visuals are insane as well and things like that. And I'm sure that has something to do with the way that it sounds, but I love the fact that there's so much purity at the start of it. With, you know, it's not just all out. Like, they could have released any track, right? Any combination of Linkin Park sounding songs, but they've given us a song that's allowing Chester to speak up front, right, with his beautiful clean sound. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was, if you listen, I mean, this is all quintessential Linkin Park. You've got that sort of like synthy low end. You've got like a strong sort of synth melody, which is, you know, something that's really sort of like an iconic sort of powerful melody, right? And then they sort of bring it back, and then Chester's beautiful clean sound comes in. A little bit of low end rumble from the guitars. That's about it, you know. But see, like, he has this ability to sing clean, and yet somehow it still sounds saturated and expressive and rich, right? It's not just like a no, 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 no. It's like he's just has this energy and electricity. You can still feel it flowing through there, like a really nice sounding valve amp. But, you know, he's not leaning into that. It's just the way that he sounds, you know. That's part of his magic.
Somewhere down inside of me, something I cannot repair.
Oh,
Even though
beautiful pitch
it
too.
will always be, I pretend it isn't there. I'm trapped in yesterday, where the pain is all I know, and I'll never break away. 'Cause when I'm alone, I'm lost in these memories, living behind
What an intense experience. So, like the thing is, typically I'll come in here and I'll analyze the music or, try to relate that to something that, with my personal experience, add a little bit more insight into what I'm hearing and things like that. But there's no reason to do that. This is quintessential Linkin Park. And on any other day, in any other time, in any other place, this would be just a great Linkin Park song. It's an album track for sure, or at least it was probably designed to be. But standing here on its own as a standalone song, you can't help but drill down to the message, and the message really with this song is the lyrics, right? It's, the chorus. Lost in these memories. It just, it's pretty broad, but there's definitely references to the pain, right? Artists like Chester don't just write generic phrasing. They write from experience. They write from what they're feeling. It's their poetry, right? And sometimes it's easy to hear a band like Linkin Park, and not so much talking about this track, but in general, and sort of just write off, the lyrics as being pretty straightforward, kind of typical rock sort of, pain and love and lost love and all that sort of thing. But it's not until you get to look back in hindsight and see what's going on where you can sort of like correlate some of those messages with the artist's actual experience, because there's writers like Leonard Cohen whose poetry is really sort of visceral and really sort of, his language is beautifully poetic and lyrical. And he has a way of framing the world in a way that you can't help but sort of listen to it and be taken along on the ride and picture the room and the smells and the flavor of the coffee or the, whatever it is that he's talking about. Whereas a lot of time in rock, it's kind of like that whole dichotomy of, the strong man sort of thing where men don't really talk about their feelings and things like that. With rock, a lot of times that the impetus behind the motivation to write the lyrics is veiled by fairly, expressive lyrics, but it's more like sound bites, right? It's not quite as poetic and lyrical as like an Edgar Allan Poe or somebody like that, but doesn't mean that the message is any less poignant or less strong. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely rock songs out there that have broken my heart, right? But sometimes, with a band like Linkin Park, it's easy to get caught up in the sound. Like we all punch our fists in the air when we listen to tracks off Hybrid Theory or Meteora and things like that. And, to some people, lyrics are the foremost thing. They relate to the lyrics. I'm more of like I like riffs and I like melody, and I like the energy and the vibe a song gives you more than the lyrics themselves. In a lot of cases, I've said that before because I'm more of a composer than a lyricist. And I can see that I know that there's people out there listening right now who don't understand what I'm saying, and they're like, everything Chester wrote is beautiful poetry, and it sees into my soul, and I get that. I totally understand. But for me, like I look at those lyrics, and if this song hadn't been presented in this way, in this time frame with this experience, I don't know that I would have read too much into those lyrics. And that's the tragedy of it, right? Because he was pouring his heart out in his own way, and in a way that sort of suits the band, and it suits the style, and it suits the phrasing, it suits the sound and the timbre of the voice and everything like that. But it's one of those things where I can look back in hindsight and go, oh my God, there's real pain here, as opposed to it just being a kind of a cool, flashy song, and that kind of breaks my heart a little bit too. That feels really weird to me. But yeah, listening to this and hearing what he was trying to say at the time.
Pain inside, but I will never be alright. I try
Right?
to keep this pain inside, but I will never be.
I try to keep this pain inside, but I'll never be all right. You can't express yourself more clearly than that. And again, I would have probably written that off as being kind of like, yeah, okay, that's, you know, they're good lyrics for a rock song. It's kind of cool. But knowing the backstory now and the pain that Chester was in, it's like, man, he was telling us right on Front Street. And all anyone sees is a kick-ass rock vocalist, you know? I was not ready for this. Oh my God. Look, honestly, I'm super glad that they released this. They could have easily not, you know, but I'm glad that this is out there. I don't know if they're linking this to, was it a reissue of Meteora or something and they're tacking this on there? I don't know, but the song says a lot with, you know, without saying much. And it's a beautiful piece standing alone that could have very easily, like I said earlier, been lost among so many amazing tracks on that album, you know, and it would have been a waste. This is actually really fortuitous that it ended up this way. And the funny thing is, like when they wrote and produced this song back in the day, I mean, did they know what they had? Did they know? Maybe that's part of the reason why it never ended up on the album, was because they sort of looked at it and went, it's kind of a cool track, but there's better songs. But this, it speaks volumes. It really does. And it's a tragedy if it would have just got overlooked or missed, you know. Very cool. Very cool. That's about all I got to say. I hope it was something. I hope you gained something out of this experience, because I sure did. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a lot more listening to Linkin Park through different ears now. And yeah. Anyway, if you feel like I brightened your day at all, feel free to support the channel just by buying me a coffee. I'll leave a link in the description. Don't forget to like, share, follow, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. If you like this sort of thing, that's what I do. Except usually I'll talk a little bit more about how the song's put together and not how it's affected me personally. But look, thanks for coming along on this journey. Yeah, I mean, this was tougher than I thought. It definitely was. Thanks again. Stay primal. Catch you in the next one.